Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for being here today. I would like to introduce today's speaker, Ben Ladani. Ben has been building websites and web products for the past 20 years. He is the founder of Creative MMS, a digital marketing agency, and is co-founder of Deployment.com, a white label Web3 platform and consulting company. He's been at the forefront of new technologies like Web 2.0, responsive web design, web accessibility, content management systems, and now Web3. So thank you so much for being here, Ben, and I will pass it on to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Zoe.
Of course.
Yeah, so we're going to cover a little bit about Web3, but first I wanted to dive in a little bit about me. So I live in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Met my wife in Villanova at Villanova University. I have 3 kids, yellow lab, also named Nova, so you could tell how much I love Villanova. Run a digital marketing agency in Philadelphia called Creative, as Zoe said, and I'm working on a startup in the Web3 space called Deployment. I'm a self-proclaimed geek. I geek out over things like gardening as well. It's one of the things I love to do. And I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in computer science from Villanova University. So some of the things we're going to cover today, just in terms of topics, we're going to discuss the meaning of Web3. I'm going to explain blockchain, wallets, NFTs, some of crypto as well, trying to stay very high level and not go too deep into the technical weeds. We'll talk about some of the projects that are currently built with Web3 and innovation that's already happening, and discuss some of how I think these technologies are going to change the web. We'll give some examples of industries that are going to be most impacted, review some opportunities and threats to your business and to you personally, and we'll discuss some of the web essentials that will stand the test of time. My goal really is that everyone that is listening to this will have a clear understanding of blockchain, and it will click for you and how it's going to change the web, the world, and how that all may work in the future. So let's start with, what is Web3? When you hear Web3, the general and non-specific version that's accepted is that Web3 is a concept around the use of new technologies that can change the way we interact online. New technologies being the key term in there. And if you really think about this, this is just, you could have inserted Web 2 in that same sentence, because whatever the new technologies were then, it was the same thing. It's an evolution of the technologies and what's available for us to use, right? So what new technologies exist now and where do we come from tends to be one of the first questions. I want to take you back to Web 1, right? What was Web 1? Web 1 is basic web, HTML. Websites were really much more basic. It's a one-way street. Think of it like the platforms or companies were putting out a website, and it was just a one-way street to its user, from the website to the user. Where Web 2.0 became a lot more of a two-way street. There were things like social media. Websites were putting content up and allowing users to put content up as well. And so that got a little bit of user-generated content going. Things like YouTube, Facebook, Twitter started to evolve. And there were companies now monetizing the data that's there. And so what's Web3? Web3 is not really any different than the fact that it's a progression of new technologies. There's just new technologies, a lot of which are scary buzzwords that you hear around VR, AR, AI, a lot of acronyms, semantic web, and of course, blockchain. And we're going to talk a lot about blockchain as being one of those technical advancements. But since the advancement comes from technology, the drivers are usually a development community, and they use the tools to forge ahead. So they're really the drivers of these things, and a lot of those terms center around those new drivers of technology. So I wanted to clear something up in terms of Web3 and Web 3.0. This was an interesting fact that I found in doing some research. But Timothy Berners-Lee, he's off on the left. He is coined as the inventor of the internet, and he says that it's all about websites speaking the same language, standardizing the rules of communication. Timothy Berners-Lee is really big into saying that Web3 should all be about us speaking the same technical, robotic, human language so that websites can all speak to each other. But Gavin Wood, off on the right side, he coined Web3 as the founder of Ethereum, and he says that it's all about blockchain, okay? So for all intents and purposes, no offense to Timothy Berners-Lee, but I am going to focus way more on Gavin Wood's camp, because I believe blockchain is going to drive the most technical advancement over the web these days. And what I'm going to be discussing is mostly around that advancement. So I told you that I have a degree from Villanova University. I said I have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. But if you had to validate that, how would you? I mean, how do you even know if it's really true? I could show you my diploma. I have one printed out and hanging on my wall in my office. But you really couldn't judge that that's accurate or not unless you went to Villanova, talked to the registrar, and really gain the truth about my enrollment, my grades, and my diploma. Any of that validation would truly take a third party. So let's talk about that registrar and that third party for a second. They're responsible for keeping the records of my enrollment, keeping the status, graduation status, certifications that I may have gotten. If I had transferred, they'd handle all that paperwork that went back and forth, because they keep what I would call a ledger of all of the things that happen with students, where they come and go, their grades, transactions, things like that. And they provide the validation. They provide that truth of what happened. So if you were trying to verify somebody's employment and they said they went to Villanova, you could validate that through calling the registrar. They are what I would call a centralized authority or a third-party validator. And these third-party validators, they really issue the certifications. They validate ownership requests. They keep that ledger. They may handle the transfers. And of course, they're going to handle a lot of the financial transactions that are related towards the transfers and the things that the registrar needs to keep. When you think about that third party, the example that I just gave, you really could expand that out to see that those third parties exist all over the place, right? We see them in almost every walk of life. Universities is the example I gave, but there are also golf clubs, insurance companies, title companies, banks, even governments as central truth authorities, because the truth isn't self-evident, right? It's not like we always know what to believe when somebody says it. There needs to be constant verification going on day in and day out. Take this, for example. This is the lobby of a DMV, an experience that many people probably know and may not have been the best experience, but the DMV is a third-party validator for your driver's license. And you have to go through them to get that information about validation. Here's another one. You're in line at a bank. We've all experienced standing in a line at a bank, probably more so when we were younger, but if you think of a bank, also think about how those bank transactions happen. The bank has to keep a ledger of every transaction that goes through the system and reconcile the amounts at the end of the day, the accounts that they have, because there may have been transfers from one bank to another to validate that there is a certain amount in the account that was transferred into or transferred out of. So you ever send a wire transfer and wait like 3 days for a bank-to-bank transfer, an ACH payment that takes some time? Most of that is because there's a lot of ledgering that has to happen, and many banks talking to many other banks to be able to make that happen. So what if there's a technology that could handle the ownership questions, the technology that could answer authority, the ledger, and even the disbursement of things like finances? Think of it like one big database technology that we can entrust that would do all of that heavy lifting as the authority. And what if we really relied on this technology, almost as if it's as complex as the internet, just to handle the ownership questions? I'm not talking about a centralized database, like really at all. I'm talking about just a standardized truth that we can rely on to provide us those third-party validation and information. That's what blockchain really can do for us. It basically is the description of blockchain. There's still an issuer, and the issuer puts things on the chain, but the other parties that are there can rely on the ledger or the blockchain to be able to tell them the certain truths that exist about ownership and what's happened. It's also not one central database. It's spread across multiple computers, and it's called distributed. So it's less prone to errors by one mistake or one person holding all the data. I'm not going to get any more technical than that. Just trust that it works. So I know it's complex, right? So we're going to take a big step back out of that. Forget blockchain as its core, and just think of it this way. Remember when the internet came out and we then all of a sudden could send email? We didn't have to rely on the post office anymore to entrust them to deliver a mail or message that we put inside the mailbox. You then were able to draft an email, hit send, and trust that the other party that you sent the email to was able to get that. And I still, to this day, I think many people don't understand how that all works, but you rely on that day in and day out. You rely on the technology platform to deliver the email in a way that you can trust that it got there, and you can trust that you can get one back. So in my opinion, the concept that I have is that in the future, we're going to rely on blockchain as an underlying technology to handle that truth, validation, and ownership in much the same way that the internet handles some of our communication delivery now. And similarly, I don't think most people are going to understand how it works, but I do think they'll use it day in and day out as the backbone of that third-party validation. One of the other key facts here is that the tool doesn't just allow people to prove ownership with other authorities. Really, anyone can validate ownership with anyone else. So we can easily see and understand the ledger. When you really think about that, it's powerful because you, as a business owner, may be able to validate using this tool the truth and ownership of other people's assets. We'll get into some examples of why that might be useful, but maybe you can think of some on your own. Another piece of this puzzle is that there's a tool called Etherscan. So I said that users can validate other users' information about what's on blockchain. Well, this tool called Etherscan is specifically for the Ethereum blockchain, and it provides a web-based view into the ledger. It's really geeky, and I'm not going to get too far in the weeds on it, but just understand that I or anybody else can see what other people own, what they've transacted, and what they've transacted on through blockchain using the public ledger that's out there. So just like a physical wallet, that stores some of the important physical items. If you think about my Villanova degree and maybe I had like a card or something that documented my title or my insurance or something, we store those items in a wallet. Well, we store the digital items in a digital wallet, right? So you can see here, Metamask and Coinbase, they're two of the wallet technologies that provide a plugin to go around the web and connect a wallet so you can interact with websites. There's also physical wallets you could take offline that don't need to connect to the internet, but still store some assets. So the main point here is that users can really hold their own digital assets in wallets so that, let's say, if I could get to the point where my Villanova degree was something I could carry around with me, I might keep it on a blockchain wallet so that I could always show and people could validate that I truly am who I say I am from a degree standpoint. Digital wallets also can store other things as well, right? So if you think of these wallets like a mobile wallet on your Android or iPhone devices, you download a ticket to a game, a play, or something like that, and it saves it in your wallet. It stores all of your digital tickets, and then you can store the gift cards, movie tickets, plane tickets, and use them to get into your flight or to get into the play or whatever it is. So it's a very similar concept in that there's a wallet to store your digital assets, but those digital assets can be multiple things, and we're going to talk about that. Big step back here. There's an issuer that issues something of value to its users. There's a technology that the issuer uses to handle the validation, the authentication, and the ownership, underlying ownership requests. And the users have wallets to store the things that have been issued to them. That's really important and a backbone of understanding blockchain of those three facts. But beyond just storing the tickets, these digital wallets can store other things, I said. So they can store things like money or crypto, as we call it, when something's issued over blockchain. So let's talk about MetaMask for a second. MetaMask, I mentioned, is a wallet technology, and it allows you to install a plugin in your browser or download a mobile app and browse apps or the web with the ability to interact with those websites financially using crypto. So what that means is if you take a big step back to when you logged into a website in Web 1, you might have signed in with a username and password, and then the account information was all in the database for that website. In Web 2, you may have connected using Facebook or logged in with Google or Twitter, and then the information for your login was in a different platform, but you were logged into a new environment that might be able to get some information from you. Well, in Web 3, you're going to be able to connect a wallet. You can do it right now. I mean, there are websites, I will give you examples, that are already doing this. But what that allows is the visibility into your ownership of assets that are on blockchain so that the website can engage you in different ways, or you already can validate information with the website in a more deep and meaningful way. So let's take a big step back here and talk about crypto. I've mentioned crypto, and I know a lot of times people's eyes glaze over when they hear that. They think of crypto and blockchain and Web3 as being all the same thing. And the rise of Bitcoin and the rise of Ethereum, or the decline of either one of those, they look at as a demonstration of how this technology is going to apply. And it's not the same. But crypto is important because we talked about an issuer that has to issue something like a currency to a user to be able to use it. Here's the best example I've ever heard. You're seeing a picture of an arcade here, right? Remember when you went into an arcade, what's the first thing that mom or dad would do? They would hand you a $5 bill or a dollar bill or something and say, go play. So the first thing you did when you got that $5 bill was you put it into the token machine and you got tokens back, right? You cashed your money in for tokens that you could use to play the games. And in this case, the arcade was an issuer. They issued you those tokens. Those tokens could be used to play the machines that were in their environment inside their arcade. But what happened to those tokens when you left the arcade? They lost their value, right? They weren't interoperable with other arcades. But that's what crypto in a sense is that Ethereum as a blockchain is able to issue you tokens that you can then use, but they're not tied specifically only towards one environment if other environments accept Ethereum as its currency. Same thing with Bitcoin, where Bitcoin could be a currency that's accepted across the web. So remember how I said that one example of a central authority might be that bank or government? Well, now imagine that the issuer is issuing currency, just like the government issues cash through a bank, and they're issuing that currency in the form of tokens, just like the arcade. But instead of being the US dollar or yen or some national currency, it's Bitcoin or Ethereum that could be used like those arcade tokens. And this has some pretty good qualities to it when you really think about it. The interoperability of not only using it in one arcade, but maybe using it across the web is extremely valuable. Think about that as being from one business to another business as a token that could go also globally, which is my second point. It's a global currency. So the technology governs the rules, not one government, and then that currency could be a shared currency used across the world. Also, the truth of the transaction is public for all to see. Right now, if I had to Venmo somebody money or something, Venmo would be the deciding factor on whether or not the money got to the person and they got it, where blockchain in and of itself inherently does the exchange of the money from wallet to wallet and the validation that something went from one place to the other, providing that public truth in the ledger. Very powerful. So crypto's cool. Talk about that as a way for us to exchange stuff over the web, but it's really, to me, not the most exciting thing about blockchain. Money, it's not unique. I have it, I can send it to someone else, but a college degree needs to be unique to me, right? It has to be one of one, issued by Villanova and then given to me on some date representing something that they've decided. Technically, that's what an NFT is. You could see the Bored Ape here that you've probably seen many times before, a Bored Ape, but that's an NFT. It's a non-fungible token, meaning that it's one of a kind. It's unique to the issuer, one of one, and when somebody owns it, the blockchain determines and documents and ledgers that person truly owns that digital asset. So not only now could your wallet store currency, but it can store items that are unique to you, that you collect, have been issued to others and you've purchased, or have just been transferred to you. Really, really powerful stuff. I mean, if you thought about it in terms of physical items, think about this. Like, this is, first of all, my son in a Villanova shirt, of course, but took him to see a baseball card that was a really high dollar, rare baseball card. It's a 1952 Mickey Mantle rookie card. If you think of it like how rare it is, it's like a physical version of an NFT, right? I mean, it's the first way that we have thought about collectibles and baseball cards and things like that, but there are only a certain number of them. And they don't all have this mint rating, which was a way of deciding the rarity of the item. But now the NFTs could represent something like this, where it's issued digitally, could have that rarity to the point of where I have a Bored Ape. It's one of only 10,000 that was issued in a collection. And it's something that could be determined as having value because other people would want to collect it or buy it. But this goes beyond collectibles and baseball cards and things like that, because they don't just have to be collectibles. They could be media or content. Really, anyone can be an issuer or a creator and put something up on blockchain. So the big part of that tech advancements is that issuers can be those creators too. So Topps created that baseball card, issued it in print. Now on blockchain, anyone can issue or create something digitally and put it up on blockchain. So for example, remember this video that you see here, this is the Charlie Bit My Finger video. Well, it sold for $760,000 because now they were able to document the ownership of a digital item. That creator was able to say, I'm selling the rights to this digital item to somebody else. And we'll get into this in a little bit, but the creators can also share in that wealth, which is really powerful. So we also could pre-program processes into this blockchain, right? Think about, the ability for that creator to put something up with rules about what happens when it gets transferred, or for, what happens to it when it stays on the chain for so long, on blockchain for so long. These pre-programmed processes, they work through something called smart contracts. They can issue currency upon events of things happening. For example, like paying royalties to the issuer or the creator when something is bought and sold. We're going to talk through an example of something like that. And like exchanging money or crypto at its core, that can happen directly through the smart contract. And another one that's popular is things like gaming. In gaming, game characters can morph, evolve based on engaging play. There's something called play to earn, or P2E, that happens. So these program processes are called decentralized apps, or DApps, whereas they can be put up on blockchain and they can run code or scripts that do financial transactions tied towards activity in blockchain. Very powerful stuff. So I keep mentioning that issuer creator could have gotten paid a royalty, but this is a really common way that things are bought and sold on blockchain right now in a model transaction that might work like this, right? So in this situation, the buyer purchases an NFT from the seller, right? Buyer purchases it from the seller and wants to pay 1 ETH for the item. So they're going to get an NFT in their wallet by paying 1 ETH for an item. But it's going to cost them 1.1 ETH because 0.1 has to get paid back to the issuer creator in order for this transaction to happen. When you think about the aspects of that, if Charlie Bit My Finger video gets sold to someone else, that creator could get a royalty, not just the first time it's sold, but every single time it's sold in perpetuity. And that's really powerful as a shift for creators to be the ones that get paid versus third parties that maybe used to get paid for things like Web 2. So I just said a whole lot. Slow down a second. Recap a little bit on the things that you just learned, because if you got all of this, you basically would get blockchain and understand a lot more about what's happening in the underlying technology to be able to use it in the future. Let's recap. So it relies on weaken and trust, validation, ledger, and authentication to a technology layer, right? We call that blockchain. Currency can be ledgered through this layer. We call that crypto. And we can use that layer, that technology, to handle verification and the transfer of assets, not just NFTs, but also crypto. Programs can run on-chain. When you hear something say it's on-chain, it just means it's on blockchain and running on-chain. And an individual's users' digital assets are stored in these personal digital wallets. Unique, one-of-a-kind items, call them NFTs, non-fungible tokens, can be issued, added on-chain, and then stored in that user's wallet or the owner's wallet. Whoever bought it owns it now. So one really now can own unique digital assets. That is what I would consider new. So that's as deep as we're going to go on the technology. You got the depth of everything, but now let's talk about the breadth of it. How is this going to evolve and change things that we currently know? So first off, my belief is that this is adopted by users, then there's a lot of ways that it's going to be able to change the way we engage online. First of all, users are going to be responsible to carry their digital assets around the web with them. They're going to hold their own Villanova degree or their certifications in their own wallets. Wallet connections, as you can see, you can go from website to website, connect your wallet, but they're going to verify that user information as people navigate around the web. And I think connected wallets on websites will be very commonplace. That said, other brands or people, once a wallet is connected, could know what's in your wallet. I mean, there's a certain amount of savviness that goes into putting things in the right places in your wallets so that when you connect your wallet, people can't see everything. Deeper loyalty and engagement. I think brands are going to grow more loyal to customers and vice versa because there's now this clear level of ownership of a brand relationship that didn't exist before. Owning an NFT right now represents a greater level of community and engagement with a brand. And detailed tracking is going to increase the user's expectation. We're going to talk about this a little bit in some of the approaches of blockchain right now, but the variability that the technology can do something is going to push users' expectations. It's happened over and over and over again. But if I expect a website can be responsive, then it should be responsive. And so just like websites like Grubhub show us the process of an order, when we go order something, we are going to expect things like sustainability tracking on items we care about, because the technology can now do that for us. Things can be ledgered. So we may be years away from this, but we started to see it happen. And when users say, I should be able to, that tends to push things forward. Creators can benefit financially based on usage and may retain some of the control of the things that they've created. So everyone can be a creator. That's nothing new, but the fact that they could put it on blockchain will open up some ways for people to make money by being a creator. So think of it like creating a skin in a video game. I don't know if any of you have kids, but my kids play some video games and they buy the skins in video games and they buy new worlds that they can use in other games. And people can download, my kids can download that game for purchase. But imagine that the person that designed that skin can collect royalties in perpetuity every time that skin is sold from one user to another. That's really powerful. You can think of that applying to music and video and other assets as well. Blockchain really empowers creators to gain some of the control on how they get paid for the usage of the things that they create. So let's look at some of the examples of this in action. These are things, some of them may be complex, but if we talk about them a little bit abstract, hopefully you can get an idea of what's happening and start to think about how you might need to apply this on your own. So we talked about baseball cards, and I think this is maybe one of the simplest examples, but Top Shot here, NBA's Top Shot, is selling digital collectibles as NFTs. So not only are these things like the rookie card that I showed you, but think of them now as being like key plays and moments in sports. These digital items like videos and photos can be issued and owned, and we go beyond paper to the things, like I said, that are video and audio. People can collect these items in their wallet, hold on to them for the value. And I really truly think that the NBA is banking on the metaverse coming to life, where people can show off what they own. Maybe I can say, do you want to see this play that I own, one of 50 of that nobody else can play inside the metaverse? Really interesting, definitely a good use case for collectible versions of NFTs. So talk a little bit about audio as being one of the things that people can create, but this platform, Audius, is basically a Web3 version of Spotify in my mind, right? So rather than publish songs to Spotify and then let Spotify decide how much is going to get paid, Audius is using those royalty rights and the tracking aspects of blockchain to provide a decentralized platform for musicians to get paid for listens. So I create a song, I issue it on blockchain, and then through their decentralized app, other people listen to it, I get paid automatically. As they listen, my wallet fills up with crypto. Very cool as that applies for creators and especially for musicians, and this is gaining steam. Another one, and this is a really big use case for NFTs right now, is just to document and define membership and community. So Gary Vaynerchuk has started this Fly Fish Club, and he's been a very outspoken voice on blockchain and on NFTs. He's a big fan and is self-proclaimed making a lot of money on it. But basically what he's done is sell access to a VIP restaurant through NFTs. And it's a members-only dining club where memberships purchased on blockchain as an NFT, and then he could determine who can come in based on that ownership. And it could get sold over time. And guess what? Every time it does, there may be royalty payment tied to it where he continues to collect. We talked a little bit about sustainability, traceability, tracking, but this is a really use case of it. Really lets you blockchain supply chain tracking alignment. So since there's a ledger that can handle the path of an item from maybe where it was harvested through to where it went through in the process of being sold, you could see how this will apply to all of supply chain. But they are using it for showing people that are purchasing diamonds the entire track record, the chain of what has happened in traceability of that diamond. This is another one. This is one of my favorites that recently launched. It's basically token gated commerce. So everybody knows Shopify. Shopify is a platform where you can start your own commerce and sell online. Well, just like Gary Vee requires you to own an NFT, the rest of this NFT can represent your ability to purchase certain e-commerce items online. And I really see this area growing where NFT represents some ownership in brand loyalty that gives you rewards in the form of access or discounts or other things because you're documenting and declaring your relationship with the brand. So those are some of the examples. Let's talk about some others that I see may be impacted in terms of industries if blockchain is truly adopted across the board. First off, certifying authorities, right? We talked a lot about this, but the university example can be carried forward to things like governments to validate something, insurance companies to validate title companies themselves. And you go to a closing and you have to pay a title company to check whether or not you truly own the title to your house. That could potentially be solved by blockchain. And then membership clubs, the golf club that says whether or not I'm truly a member could be determined by NFTs accessed through blockchain and validated on a ledger. Supply chain, I mean, the one that I just showed you in terms of diamonds is a great example, but you could see that applying to all food and drug. I mean, recall on a head of lettuce, let's say, could absolutely help, let's say, for somebody that purchased that head of lettuce, scan a QR code and be able to say, I know that that was created way back when, this was when it was harvested, and this is part of the recall, I'm going to throw it out. Fair trade organizations as well, making sure that the coffee that you're getting is grown sustainably and coming from the right place. Healthcare, I mean, insurance claims, anybody that's gone through the insurance claim process, maybe in a car accident, you know, you have the person that you got in the accident with has insurance and you have insurance, and there's all this validation of who has what insurance and did it really happen on what date and time, and information entered 3 different places. And so that's definitely one from overall insurance. But for healthcare, it could just be tracking across the board of my health and my issues that I've had from a child all the way growing up that could help advance healthcare. Personal health history would become very interesting to see tracked across blockchain. Collectibles, we've already seen this as well. This was probably one of the first use cases as far as things that are like Bored Ape Yacht Club and other things on OpenSea and Rarible, but artists and musicians putting up collectibles that others can download, and sports organizations, you know, like I showed you, NBA Top Shot, others can mimic that and continue to do that to, again, bridge the gap between the brand or the person, the influencer, let's say, and the users or the followers, the fans. And lastly, finance. And I don't mean this to be completely comprehensive. There could be other industries that will definitely get impacted, but last that I have here, finance, decentralized asset ownership, the ability for us to now really truly decide that somebody owns a portion of an asset. Because the technology does that, I think is groundbreaking. So you could take, let's say, a very high value physical asset like the Mickey Mantle rookie card and say, I'm going to divide that up into 100 NFTs that represent ownership stake in this. That's a real use case for the ability for the technology to govern decentralized asset ownership or fractionalized ownership of an item. Decentralized asset ownership too is also a lot about what we call DAOs, DAO, but the ability for people to just, you know, contribute to an organization that is run by a set of rules that people vote on and vote up. So if I have an NFT, I can vote on something that then gets put into law, and we as a community that all own NFTs are basically dictating our own future with our own rules. There's something called City DAO that's doing that now. They purchased some land out by Yellowstone National Park and raised a bunch of money and are issuing the city governance through DAO by having voting go on in places like Discord and other channels. And then governments are going to be impacted as a result. As you can see, I mean, if finance is upturned, that's going to impact governments for sure. So they will be impacted as well. So what are some of the opportunities and threats here? If you're a business owner, I think there's a ton of opportunities because, number one, these tools empower engagement and community. You have the ability to leverage NFTs to build a community around you. And not that everybody needs to do that or should do that, but there are some really good use cases of people demonstrating their relationship with a brand and a brand being able to allow that demonstration to happen. Definitely differentiating with emerging tech. You can gain a competitive advantage by using new technology. That goes for any new technology. But in this case, there are some really good opportunities to gain some advantage there, especially if it's sustainability and tracking and things that use the technology for what it's really good at. The development community is forging ahead, so I see this as a big opportunity to start experimenting with what's out there and what's possible. There's tools like Alchemy that help develop some blockchain solutions. And there's companies like mine and with my partner, Deployment, that help people get products, contracts, certificates on chain with things like royalties built in. So really, I think the opportunity here is to look at all the developers that are advancing and using this and leverage their knowledge to be able to start to see how that might apply to your business. Maybe it's consulting in the form of what does Web3 do for me? But leverage those experts that know the space and that keep you ahead. What about threats? So there's a bunch of really big threats, some of which are definitely holding the advancement of this back. First of all, security. I mean, I don't know about anybody else, but me holding my own certification for Villanova and me being completely responsible for it is a little bit scary. So there's thoughts around does somebody really want to hold that asset in their own wallet? Or is it better for third parties that could help and fix things if anything goes wrong, be more responsible for that? Issuers may not really want to decentralize. I mean, there's a lack of control. If you thought about a golf club issuing membership through a technology and not having control over deals that they may make with fourth generation families or rules about who can apply and who can't, they really might not want technology dictating all the rules. I mean, just think of that the same way with governments and currency issuance, that governments right now have the ability to issue currency, and that could, in a sense, stifle the ability for crypto to be leveraged. And overall, big business may fight to keep that control. I mean, if you talk about something like Meta, Facebook's now Meta, right? But if they wanted to keep everything in their ecosystem with their own coin and their own, tokens and their own NFTs and their own access to the metaverse, that would stifle some of the interoperability that we talked about as being a good advancement. And then government getting behind this. I mean, typically they're slow to adopt some of the newer technologies. There's a need to understand it and build rules and taxes and issuance and things like that around it. So that is definitely a threat right now to if I use this and I advance with it, will it ultimately shut down at some point and not be used? So not trying to leave Timothy Berners-Lee totally in the dust. I know we mentioned him as being like more about the semantic web and some of the other things that are out there. But these are some of the emerging technologies that are not necessarily blockchain that I watch out for. So semantic web, thinking about all companies being able to use schema and websites and standardizing the way that everybody communicates so we can all technology and people, robots, Alexa, all of those types of devices, Siri, being able to gain the same set of standards and information out of a website is a big part of the future emerging tech. Big data, knowing what the user data rights are, how to leverage them for good. Everybody's heard that term before. AR and augmented reality. There's a lot of opportunity here to train and educate based on some of those real world interactions. And the technology is still really only at an enterprise level, but as AR, the ability for me to put glasses on and see an augmented view of the world with additional information, if that comes down to small businesses and is more attainable, that's going to have some really good applications of things like training and advancements in science and technology. Virtual reality, but any company that has to deal with space right now, if you're a real estate company, self-storage, designer, virtual reality presents a lot of opportunities for that. And artificial intelligence, but things like marketing and advertising right now are really being enhanced by AI. If you think about Google and programmatic advertising getting better and better and more targeted, AI is definitely something to look into for leveraging to be able to advance a business. Knowing the metaverse and what that means is important, I think, especially as you start to think about e-commerce as it's going to be done in the metaverse. There is the way to interact with these digital tools to be able to flow into a room and just like you might jump into a Zoom, but put on a headset, get into a world and engage with others. And so didn't want to leave these behind. They're all very emerging technologies that are going to shape some of the future of the web for sure. Don't want to miss some of the essentials, right? So these rules will still apply. Content is still king. You have to continue to engage with your audience using content. And just like I've said about all of the different things that can be blockchained, NFTs in a sense are still content, video, photos, some of the audio stuff. You need to be able to be producing content to engage and reach your audience. Design standards are forging ahead. Some of these new tools and the ability to push some boundaries are pushing design standards. I would be aware of that and know that. And then open source and licensed technologies do exist. Invest in whoever you trust for the technology advancement in your business and how it applies to your business. I would suggest you always be investing in that team's education. If it's somebody at your company, if it's an agency that you work with, always make sure that they're learning so they can tell you what to do to apply it. Think about what your business does and think about what customers might expect to get without talking to you, and make sure that you're really thinking about how you could do that, understanding and leveraging blockchain. So tell me what I need to do next. Learn yourself or be advised for sure. Make sure you are thinking, I need to have trusted advisors or partners. Think community. Build meaningful connections around meaningful interactions. That is the name of the game. Be it blockchain or not, community is extremely important these days. And adapt your digital strategies to connect deeper. Things like CRM, Salesforce, or HubSpot are extremely huge, especially because as things like Google Apocalypse happens and we take away cookies and all the data that we used to have access to starts to go away, your direct community, your direct connection with your audience is going to be very important. So we see that there will likely be an uptick in CRM because people are going to need to bind together with their audience more directly and not just in trust marketing platforms to do it. Make sure you look at level up your website's content and accessibility. It should engage all audiences. You have to think about the fact that, number one, there's accessibility for people that are disabled that may need to access certain levels of content, but also that content could be leveled up depending on your engagement with the community. So you can create levels of content access using things like a connected wallet. That's going to be a future I really foresee, where you go to a website, connect your wallet, and you can see things that others can't because you've documented your brand evangelism by owning an NFT. Know your users' data rights. I mean, like I said, cookies are going away. Understand what customer data you can gain and start to think about what you might be able to get out of a connected wallet. I think that's still new, but I do see opportunity for marketers to be able to gain information out of connected wallets that they couldn't before. Access really may be the next frontier. I mentioned NFTs that document or really kind of define your relationship with a brand. They are being used right now for access to things like Discord groups, Slack channels, and stuff like that. But you can think about that pushing the boundaries of, access to intranets, access to specific information or content that's unique to being a customer of a company or a brand. And so that is definitely something to think about as you forge ahead and understand more and more about blockchain. So here's a little about my company. Hopefully you learned a lot. We're a team of holistic marketing geeks. We try to stay up on all the latest and apply our knowledge all the way through strategy, design, development, marketing, content, to really apply for our partners that are mostly B2B businesses. We do that. We provide expertise, extension of resources as well, so that if there's not a marketing department that's fully fleshed out, that knows this stuff, we can bolt on and be able to help, deliver on those resources. So we've been currently working on leveraging this knowledge to apply to our clients, especially as it pertains to content marketing platforms. We do have a content marketing platform that we have built and are expanding to be able to get to Web3. And so if you're looking for help with engaging your audience, understanding and planning out a marketing strategy specifically for your business, and revamping your holistic digital presence, then definitely give us a shout. My other company is called Deployment. That has a white label but customizable Web3 marketplace. It allows companies to put up products that can be sold through blockchain. We really call it like an on-ramp for putting things on chain. It's customizable, where really products could be anything. They could represent anything that I've talked about as far as NFTs. And of course, as you can tell, it's very heavily technical. So there's some consulting that we need to provide with every single application of what we do. So that's about it. I mean, how can you learn more and keep in touch? First of all, come to Innovate 2022. That is October 19th to the 21st. I will be there. I'll be on a panel talking Web3 and NFTs. You can follow along with me at creativemms.com and deployment.com. And you can follow me personally on my LinkedIn at linkedin.com/b-ladani. Feel free to send me an email. Always love to geek out over this stuff. Would definitely be willing to jump on a call and talk through any challenges that you might be having in the space. And I just did want to put two of my favorite websites to get some of this information to stay in the know. Ethereum.org has a ton of great content, and consensus.net also has a ton of great, very related content to the things that we discussed. So hopefully this was helpful. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out.
Thanks so much, Ben. That was fantastic. That was so informative. Do we have any questions from the audience? If not, that's totally fine. And Ben, just know that I can also cut the video a little bit shorter as well. So no worries. Okay, if you want to go ahead and stop the recording, then I will have access to it